Okay, so you want to own a clubhouse. You picture rolling fairways cut into perfect stripes, a wraparound porch with rocking chairs, a bar pouring top-shelf bourbon into cut crystal while men in quarter zips talk about their handicaps, a wedding party photographing itself against the 18th green at golden hour. You picture a waiting list. You picture people begging to give you money just for the privilege of being allowed to give you more money later. On paper, membership-based businesses look like the cleanest model in the world. People pay to join, then pay every single month whether they show up or not, then pay again when they do show up, and somehow they thank you for the opportunity. If you only looked at the initiation fee, clubhouse ownership would look like the closest thing to a subscription business with a golf course attached. The problem is that a clubhouse is not really selling golf. It's not really selling food or tennis or a swimming pool either. A country club is selling a lifetime lease on belonging, and belonging is one of the most expensive things a business can be asked to keep manufacturing, because unlike a product, it never stays finished. The moment the membership starts feeling ordinary, the moment the waiting list stops being a waiting list, the entire financial structure underneath it starts to wobble. The turf still needs cutting. The irrigation still needs running. The staff still needs paying. But the thing that actually made the business work, the feeling that belonging to this particular club matters, is the most fragile asset on the balance sheet. And it doesn't show up on the balance sheet at all. So let's start with the first question. What are you actually buying when you buy a clubhouse? Most people think they're buying a golf course with a nice building attached. That's not really what a private club is. A private club is a capital-intensive, decades-long trust exercise where a group of members hands an operator hundreds of thousands of dollars up front on the promise that the grass will stay green and the exclusivity will stay exclusive for the rest of their lives. It's less like owning a restaurant and more like running a small pension fund that happens to have a pro shop. And that distinction matters because it explains why the entry costs are so brutal before you've served a single drink. Start with the land and the course itself. A standard public 18-hole course typically runs somewhere in the $2 million to $7 million range to build, depending on terrain and region. But you're not building a public course. You're building something people will pay tens of thousands of dollars to belong to, which means the number moves fast. Private clubs on the more modest end have been built for $8 million to $15 million. Congaree Golf Club in South Carolina, which opened in 2017, reportedly cost around $15 million. At the ultra-exclusive end, the math stops looking like a golf course and starts looking like a land acquisition project, a Hoopie Match Club in Georgia, which opened in 2018, reportedly cost more than $50 million. Largely because the owners weren't just buying a course, they were buying 2,100 acres to build one unbothered by anyone else's property line. And that's before the clubhouse. Clubhouse construction typically runs $300 to $700 per square foot. And a genuinely high-end clubhouse alone can cost $5 million or more once you account for a commercial kitchen, locker rooms, event space, and the kind of finish quality that makes a $50,000 initiation fee feel reasonable to the person writing the check. Then add the smaller items that pile up faster than people expect. A practice green can run $50,000 to $100,000. A driving range anywhere from $250,000 to well over $1 million, and a fleet of 60 to 80 golf carts at roughly $10,000 a piece. Call it $500,000 to $800,000, just so members don't have to walk. Then there's the part nobody budgets for correctly the first time: entitlements, water rights, environmental mitigation, zoning approval, wetland studies, community pushback if you're anywhere near a residential area. When Salish Cliffs Golf Club in Washington State opened in 2011, its roughly $6.5 million budget included extensive environmental mitigation just to be allowed to build at all. You are not simply buying dirt. You're buying the legal right to reshape dirt. And in a lot of jurisdictions, that right is not for sale so much as it's for negotiation. Add it up: course, clubhouse, carts, practice facilities, entitlements, and a genuinely private, genuinely competitive club is routinely a $20 million to $35 million commitment before a single member has teed off. Go for something truly elite, and that number can triple. And unlike a restaurant or a retail store, you can't soft launch a golf course. You can't quietly open with a smaller menu and scale up later. The fairways either exist or they don't. The clubhouse either has a commercial kitchen or it doesn't. You are fully built or you are not open. So by the time you cut the ribbon, you've already spent more than most businesses will ever borrow in their entire existence. Now and only now, we get to the part everyone imagines first: how a clubhouse actually makes money. The first stream is the initiation fee. And this is the closest thing the club business has to a nightclub's cover charge. Money that arrives before you've served a single meal, cleaned a single pool, or mowed a single fairway for that member. Initiation fees range enormously, anywhere from around $5,000 at a modest suburban club up to $500,000 or more. At the very top, Augusta National is reported to sit above that ceiling. The median initiation fee in the US will hit roughly $50,000 in 2022, which itself was a 72% jump from just 3 years earlier. Here's the part that surprises people. Initiation fees behave less like revenue and more like venture capital. That money doesn't fund this year's payroll, it funds tomorrow's clubhouse renovation, or it plugs the hole a prior renovation left behind. And exactly like a nightclub's cover charge, it's the most fragile line on the entire statement because it depends entirely on people still wanting to get in. The instant demand softens. Initiation fees don't decline gently, they can drop to zero because nobody pays a premium to join a club that feels like it's shrinking. The second stream is dues. And this is where most people assume the real money lives. It doesn't, not entirely. Average annual operating dues across US, private clubs sit around $10,700, with a median closer to $9,100. That sounds like healthy, predictable, boring revenue, and it is, except industry guidance from club finance specialists puts dues as covering only about half of a private club's total operating expenses. The other half has to come from somewhere else. Dues are the floor, not the building. A club that tries to run entirely on membership dues alone is already underwater before it opens the kitchen. The third stream is food and beverage, and this is the strangest one because it's built almost entirely around a number members are required to spend rather than a number they actually want to spend. Nearly every private club enforces a food and beverage minimum, averaging around $2,500 per family per year, sometimes structured as $100 to $300 a month. It's use it or lose it. Fail to hit the minimum, and the club bills you the shortfall anyway. On paper, that looks like guaranteed revenue, and it is. But it's also one of the most quietly resented line items in the entire membership experience, because members are effectively being taxed for meals they never ate. It functions almost like the inverse of a nightclub's comps. Instead of giving product away to manufacture atmosphere, the club is charging for product nobody consumed just to keep the dining room's books balanced. The fourth stream is golf operations itself, guest fees, cart rentals, pro shop margin. And here's the counterintuitive part. At a fully private club, this is often the smallest of the major streams, not the biggest. The golf is the reason the club exists, but it's rarely the reason the club is profitable. Which brings us to the stream. A lot of first-time owners underestimate entirely events, weddings, corporate outings, member guest tournaments, holiday banquets. For plenty of clubs, this line can rival or exceed actual golf revenue, and it becomes the real financial cushion the whole operation leans on. Which also means it becomes the load-bearing wall nobody notices is load-bearing until it gives out. So far, this sounds like an extraordinary business. Initiation fees, dues, food minimums, golf ops, banquets, 5 streams, stacked on top of a piece of land that appreciates while it's earning. Now here's the other side of the ledger. Start with maintenance, because a golf course does not stop needing money just because nobody's playing on it. Turf care, irrigation, fertilization, pest control, equipment. This cost runs 12 months a year. Rain or shine, members or no members. A course doesn't go dormant to save you money in the off-season. It goes dormant and still needs a full-time crew to keep it from dying. Then there's labor, and it's not spread evenly the way you'd hope. Grounds, crews peak in growing season. Food and beverage staff peak on weekends, holidays, and banquet nights. Pro shop and caddy staff peak in daylight hours in good weather and evaporate the second it rains. You end up managing a workforce that has to be fully staffed for maybe 40% of the calendar and mostly idle for the rest of it. And hospitality, labor servers, cooks, seasonal grounds, hands, churns constantly, which means you're perpetually retraining people to execute at a standard your $50,000 initiation members expect without exception. Then there's the reinvestment cycle. And this is where clubhouse ownership starts to resemble the nightclub business more than anyone wants to admit. A tired locker room, a dated dining room, a clubhouse that hasn't been touched since 2004, none of that reads to members as the CapEx budget is under pressure. It reads as this club is slipping. Capital projects remain one of the leading challenges cited by club leadership, industry-wide, and clubs with the strongest revenue tend to be the most aggressive about reinvesting, precisely because standing still is functionally the same as declining. The cruel part is that this spending often becomes necessary at exactly the moment. Membership revenue is softening. You need the money most right when you have it least. And then there's dependency risk, the part that looks stable right up until it doesn't. Consider the Stockton Golf and Country Club in California, a landmark founded in 1914, a pillar of its community for over a century. It expanded its clubhouse in 2006, taking on debt to do it. Then the 2008 recession hit, membership declined, and the club spent the next decade and a half depending increasingly on banquet and event bookings to bridge the gap between what dues brought in and what the fixed costs demanded. Then the pandemic arrived, and it cut in a way nobody expected. Golf itself boomed during COVID. People wanted to be outdoors. But banquet bookings, the revenue stream the club had come to rely on, collapsed. By 2022, the club owed its bank more than $8.2 million and was forced into Chapter 11. The golf was fine, the membership was fine, relatively. It was the dependency on one adjacent revenue stream event quietly propping up the whole structure that broke when that one stream disappeared. That's the smaller version of the story. The bigger version has a name most people already know, even if they don't know this part of it. In 1997, a timber baron named Tim Blixeth founded a private club on 13,600 acres outside Big Sky, Montana. It combined a Tom Weiskopf-designed golf course with a private ski mountain, the only one of its kind in the country. Membership required a $250,000 initiation fee, $16,000 in annual dues, and a minimum net worth of $3 million just to apply. It attracted members like Bill Gates and Justin Timberlake. Homes inside the development sold for staggering sums. One, the Pinnacle Residence, was priced at $155 million. For a decade, the Yellowstone Club was treated as the single most exclusive membership address in America. It looked untouchable. But underneath the exclusivity was a structure that behaved less like a club and less like a golf course than anyone realized. It was, in large part, a real estate development carrying enormous debt dressed in the language of membership and belonging. By 2007, cash flow was straining under heavy debt service. The Blixeths' divorce split control of the club, with Edra Blixeth taking on the entity and its debts while Tim walked away. A proposed $455 million sale to a private equity firm was supposed to solve the problem. It fell apart in 2008, right as the global financial crisis froze the credit markets that the entire model depended on. With roughly $40,000 left in its accounts, the Yellowstone Club filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in November of that year, owing $343 million, $307 million of it, to a single lender, Credit Suisse. The members were still real. The mountain was still real. Gates and Timberlake didn't stop being members because the golf got worse. The club failed because the golf and the skiing were never actually the business. The land development underneath them was. And when the credit that financed that development disappeared overnight, no amount of member loyalty could hold up $343 million of debt on $40,000 in the bank. That's the lesson. Clubhouse ownership keeps relearning. In different decades, under different names. A waiting list tells you people want in. It tells you nothing about what's financing the ground they're standing on. Let's put rough numbers on a more ordinary version of this. Imagine a mid-sized private club with 400 members. Dues at the industry average of $10,700. Bring in about $4.28 million a year. Add a healthy year of turnover. Say 25 new members joining at a $50,000 initiation fee for another $1.25 million. Food and beverage, between minimums and actual dining, brings in roughly $2, $5 million. Events and banquets contribute another $1.5 million. Golf operations, carts, guest fees, the pro shop adds around $700,000. Total revenue, a bit over $1 million. In a strong year, with costs under control, an operating margin around 13% to 15% isn't unusual. Call it roughly $1.4 million in profit. That's a healthy club. Now imagine membership softens by just 10%, dropping from 400 to 360. Maybe a newer club opened nearby with a flashier clubhouse. Maybe the local economy cooled. Maybe the waiting list simply stopped being a waiting list. Dues fall to about $3.85 million. New member initiation fees don't fall by 10%, they fall much further. Because nobody's rushing to buy into a club that suddenly looks less desirable. Say that drops from 25 new members to 10, cutting initiation revenue nearly in half to around $500,000. Event bookings, which are almost entirely discretionary and easily poached by a competing venue, fall by roughly a third, down to about $1 million. Food and beverage drops in proportion to the smaller, less active membership. Total revenue lands somewhere around $8.3 million, roughly a 17% decline. But the costs don't fall 17%. The grounds crew still has to maintain the same acreage. The irrigation system doesn't get smaller. Insurance doesn't renegotiate itself downward. Debt service on the original $20 plus million build stays exactly the same whether you have 400 members or 360. What was a $1.4 million profit in the strong year can compress to something close to break even or worse on what looks from the outside like a fairly modest decline. The parking lot still has cars in it, the dining room still has tables full, but the number that actually matters, the one nobody outside the finance committee ever sees, has already started collapsing. So does owning a clubhouse actually work as a business? In the optimistic version, yes, spectacularly. You control your build costs, you price your entry correctly for your market, you don't over-leverage the clubhouse renovation, you keep your grounds crew tight and your dining room full without becoming dependent on any single revenue stream, and you protect the thing that's actually driving the entire model. The sense among your members that this club, specifically, is still worth belonging to. In that world, a well-run private club can be one of the most durable, cash-generative real estate assets a community can have. In the pessimistic version, you overbuild the clubhouse to impress people who are already going to join anyway. You underprice initiation to fill the roster fast. You lean too hard on banquet and wedding revenue to cover a widening gap, and you assume the waiting list will always refill itself. Then a newer club opens, or the economy tightens, or your best members quietly let their memberships lapse because somewhere else feels fresher. Now you're financing yesterday's construction loan with today's shrinking membership, and the math that used to work stops working all at once. Here's the honest truth underneath the whole business. A clubhouse is not really a golf course, and it's not really a restaurant either. It's a machine for converting the feeling of belonging into a recurring, decades-long financial commitment, and when that feeling is real, the economics can be extraordinary. But belonging isn't a fixed asset. It has to be re-earned with every single member, every single year. And the moment it stops being re-earned, you're left holding one of the most expensive kinds of real estate there is, a golf course nobody's fighting to get into. And if you think that's a fragile foundation to build a business on, wait until you see what happens when the clubhouse isn't attached to a golf course at all, but to an entire private mountain. If you want to see that one broken down next, drop a comment and let me know. And if this kind of breakdown is useful, subscribing means you won't miss it.